Hello and welcome back to Conversations at JGU. Today, we are joined by Professor Dean Sudarshan, who's had a distinguished career in the domains of research, development, and governance. With a master's degree from the Delhi School of Economics, he was also a Rhodes Scholar at Balliol College at the University of Oxford, where he obtained a master's degree in politics. He has over 30 years of experience working with organizations such as the UNDP, and presently he is the Dean of the Jindal School of Government and Public Policy. Welcome back, Dean Sudarshan.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
All right, so Dean Sudarshan, we're at the stage where we've seen a first wave of the pandemic, we've seen a disastrous second wave, and many analysts and scientists are talking about the advent of the third wave, right? The science is fairly clear, and our researchers and pharmaceutical companies, they worked double time to come up with a number of vaccines which are presently deployed in India and across the world. And yet, as on date, only 5% of the Indian population has been adequately vaccinated with at least 2 doses. Now, what went wrong? Is there a disconnect between the science of the vaccine and how it's being deployed? And, are there concerns about policy measures or logistics measures or supply chain measures in rolling out the vaccine?
Well, many governments, including ours, when confronted with this pandemic, saw it as a virus that is virulent, spreads very quickly, and is capable of causing great damage. So they viewed it as a problem related to health and medical care of people. What do you do in such a situation? Now, the advice you get from epidemiologists and virologists would be minimize the spread of the virus by minimizing contact between an infected person and the rest of the community, isolate the infected persons and keep them locked up.
And of course, all of this is based in science.
It's all based on science. It's good science, because it says you minimize contact, you will not let the virus spread as fast as it might otherwise do. So taking that into account, we were the first off the mark, so to speak. In the case of China, a comprehensive lockdown was imposed in the province in Wuhan, not all across the vast country that China is, but we went one step better, and we decided to be on the safe side. Let's have a lockdown
for the entire
everywhere in the country.
With, if I may add, only 4 hours notice.
Yes, that may be the case. It communicates a sense of urgency about the importance of the problem. So that's all right. But the mistake there was in only listening to what science is telling you. But before you make a policy of that kind, a policy to lock down the country, it would have been a good idea to have consulted some people who know human psychology, some demographers.
Right.
If you had consulted demographers and said, we are going to ask everybody to stay in their own homes, how many people currently, right now, are in their own homes? Then they'd have got an answer that India has a very large migrant worker community who are not living in their own homes, they are living on the sites where they are working. It's not their home. Now, you'd have known that to tell them, lock yourself up in your home, didn't make much sense, but you didn't think of it. You didn't think of the fact that if you'd consulted psychologists, they'd have told you that when confronted with any danger, any fear that people have, they want to be with those who are their close family.
Who they care for and who in turn will care for them.
Yes. So obviously, the moment you say that this is a dangerous virus, you have to stay indoors, and we are stopping all transport and all communications. But you've overlooked the fact that the psychology of fear would want all these migrant workers to want to go back somehow. And if there's no road transport, no rail transport, they will walk. which is what they did.
And which is exactly what they did.
So this shows that when you are dealing with a challenge as vast and severe as the pandemic, it's very important to get a good understanding of insights from multiple social disciplines.
So are you suggesting, Dean Sudarshan, that a pandemic, which is essentially a biological affair, when dealing with something like this, not only do we need to listen to the epidemiologists and our scientists, but we should also look at non-STEM advisors, including demographers, economists, psychologists?
Absolutely. I think they are more important in a way, because the insight that you get about a virus from science is very straightforward.
Right.
And it is not nuanced and complicated or very subtle. But you see, human behavior is complicated, complex, and very nuanced.
Right. So the moment I am using government policy or a government decision to alter human behavior or to force human behavior to change, that's when all of these other issues sort of start piling up.
That's when all of these other disciplines, and there are a good number of insights. Economics has very valuable insights about how people would behave.
Right.
But people are not just the economic person,
right,
or the political person.
They're also social. They're also psychological. Right.
And to understand people, you need to understand social sciences. Because social sciences is about how people relate with one another and how they relate with the government, with the state, right, and so on. So to have a good knowledge of that is vital, particularly when you're dealing with a crisis. Right. It is necessary during normal times, but it is of heightened necessity in the case of dealing with a catastrophe or a danger like the coronavirus.
Right. I just want to quickly switch topics here slightly, Dean Sudarshan. We are waiting, or we're sort of awaiting the third wave, right? And we know it's coming. A lot of people think it's coming, right? What should the government response be?
Well, the government's response, firstly, it is not certain that there will be a third wave. It's all a case of probabilities, right? If people behave in a responsible way and don't assume that because the second wave has tapered off, all is safe, and abandon safety precautions such as wearing the mask, keeping distances, washing their hands, and so on. And if they become reckless and congregate in places,
large numbers,
and attend a Kumbh Mela or something, if they continue to do that, then the probability of a third wave is high,
imminent, I would say. Yeah.
But if you don't do that, and if you are careful, then you can avert the third wave. The second wave could have been averted.
I agree that the second wave could have been averted entirely. But that is a response that society needs to make to become more responsible, right? And do you feel that the government should have some control over that?
It is not a question. The government cannot have control over human behavior in an entire sense.
Yeah, but they did put the entire country into lockdown for 4 or 5 weeks.
Yes, they did that, but that was an extreme measure. But normally speaking, you are better off persuading and convincing people to behave in a certain way. And there are various techniques. For instance, behavioral economics, teaches you that you need some signs. For instance, if you put a sign on the road, look right.
Right. People will.
Yeah, people will look right because they see a sign saying look right. That's a natural instinctive reaction. But then when they do look right, they know if there is oncoming traffic, right? And it adds to a great deal of safety. If there was not that sign and you did not look right, you are likely to be in danger. So it is this way, a more subtle nudging way by which you have to get people to behave in the way they ought to for their own good. Now, if you tell them, you got to do it like this, human beings have an instinctive sense of rebelliousness. If they are ordered to do something, something tells you, what the hell, why should I listen to this order? right? So that's why politics is called the art of the possible, right? You got to figure out what are possibilities.
Right.
It is not it is not using the putting the gun to the head of a person. You got to get the person to internalize an obligation to obey the law.
Using a number of tools at yourselves, right? So effectively, stopping the virus is not just based in science and pharmaceuticals, not just in the vaccine, but it's a whole host of disciplines, whole host of perspectives that need to be applied in order to halt a pandemic like
exactly.
COVID-19.
And there is also vaccine hesitancy. And you now, in the age of fake news and media, you get all kinds of superstitious statements about vaccines killing, vaccines being dangerous, all completely unfounded. But nonetheless, you've got to have strategies to counter this kind of miscommunication. And so communication, again, it's absolutely vital. And unfortunately, in the initial stages of our pandemic last year, we had regular briefings from the health ministry. But after some time, the government stopped any of those briefings.
Right.
So the communication faltered. And that may be a contributory factor, among other things, to the second wave. So if you communicate with people, persuade them, in the end, it's possible. I mean, there will still be some outliers who don't believe it, who are cranks. But they are not going to matter so much in the handling of such a thing as a pandemic.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Dean Sudarshan, for this. So you heard it right over here, folks. Battling a pandemic is not just about biology, vaccines, and pharmaceuticals. It's also about economics, it's about psychology, it's about behavior, it's about communication as well. This has been a conversation at JGU. Please stay tuned for more such conversations.